lot of my colleagues are in the back there. Appreciate them coming, and a lot of familiar faces. So it is so good to be back home. I now live in Manitouish Waters. I'm the vice president of the Manitouish Waters Historical Society, and I'm basically doing a lot of historic preservation and work. And I stumbled into this topic, and it has grown to be so big, staggering later, stumbling to begin with. So it's kind of a journey of what I did after I retired here, and then the volume of content that has fallen upon me. So you have the best of series in here, but I actually left out about a third of it to keep this around an hour. So Don Schnitzler brought in for us these components of a still, all right? This would have heat under it, and they would keep the mash or organic materials that they would have underneath that, and they would boil that up, and it would turn into vapor. This coil, it would either go through this for water to cool it, or the coil would be in there, and then that vapor would turn to liquid, and then they would drip that out, and that would be the raw distilled liquor that would be used. This was found in the Up and Mansion garage. And after that, when we talk about in Presque Isle, how they treated the liquor after that really determined what its what its outcomes can be. So we have this prop, and I'm going to stand in front of it, kind of so I'm not in people's way here. But here we go. Moonshine in the Northwoods, brought to you by the Manitouish Waters Historical Society. This is Al Capone in Vilas County.
Oh, wow.
We have pictures and documents that no other historical society has. These are our moonshiners from Manitouish Waters. We're a 6x6 township, and we have a penchant for criminality. This is Abel Winnetka right here. He came up in 29, ran a place called Little Bohemia. In 1934, he hosted John Dillinger and the FBI in a gunfight. This is Louis Laporte, and he becomes a notorious moonshiner in the area. I'm an evidentiary historian. I'm not going to weave a lot of tales. I'm going to have a lot of newspaper clippings, examples, maps, and the like up there to kind of qualify the claims that I'm going to be making. But it really is a fun thing. So we have to first thank the Hawkinson and Scott family on behalf of the loving memory of the Halliburtons and Sell family. They gave us these Capone documents. They went up for auction. The Mob Museum in Las Vegas bought them all. The top dollar item went for 54 grand. All right? So these documents, when you talk about authentic documents, are really important. So they said, as long as you give us credit, you can use them. So we've given them credit, so we'll use them. Now, being a history teacher, I want to kind of give you a little frame here. Prohibition ran from 1920 to 1933, but we have evidence of moonshining from 95 to 36 in the Northwoods. They were moonshining before and after Prohibition. That's important. The first evidence we have of this is coming from the little town of Manitouish, and this was a guy who was doing some trapping. On the first day, we were going along the logging trail, which led out of Manitouish, came upon a man lying on his back in the snow in the middle of the road. He was motionless. And when I went up to him, I thought he was dead, but at length I saw he was only paralyzed by pine wood whiskey. Just the worst rock gut stuff you could find. All right? Then, in 1900, this is all before Prohibition, right where the Blue Bayou is and the two lakes that come together on Highway 51 was Buck's Spider Lake Resort. And basically, after a quarter mile, they walked from a crotch stick that seemed to be thrown to guide the way, and he kicked the ground and said, I guess you'll strike it here. He scratches away the leaves, unearths a rubber hose, and regales himself and invite others to take a pull. A lot of his guests think that liquor comes from the ground. These are the old-time cabins there. And these underground moonshine caches is what got me into this. They were hiding these all over. So here's the Buck family. This is their beautiful property right here. This is the walk from the back of the cabins over, so we know it's right in those properties. But this is interesting. Here you have Fayette and Neil Buck here. They have wife beater t-shirts on, and everybody else is in Victorian garb. These two men will abandon their wives in this picture within the next 4 years and leave the state. They were scoundrels, to be sure. Then, right across in the next lake, there was a speakeasy at Dorian's Resort. This is 1950. A speakeasy is an illegal bar where they serve cocktails and wine. A blind pig is where you get beer and shots. They're the same thing. Do you understand? And basically, they had a speakeasy behind this that only patronized men, and they go on and describe a pretty nasty fight that lasted a half hour. It was over a woman, by the way. So prohibition enforcement. I've made a case how we had a lot of violations early in the Northwoods. There's law enforcement, local, state, and federal, and they do not work complementary in the Northwoods. They usually work at odds with one another because somebody is on the take, all right? So in Manchurish Waters, we have this guy named Cap Smith. He's an Illinois guy. He's a real conservative fellow. He's a dry. He's an outlier in the community. But from their families, they said they had two big Studebakers that they found on the property next to them. They had cases of solid whiskey in the back of them. And the FBI agents, it was actually prohibition agents, and Grandpa brought them, and when they caught them there, they were on their way to Hurley. We're going to talk about Hurley and other spheres of influence in moonshining. But he was a rare bird with being dry. But the whole notion within the United States is there was a huge movement to take us in the lighter color area in our dries. You can see we are more damp here in Wisconsin. But you would be surprised the dry communities that popped up, and this is an attempt at social engineering. And so here's Wisconsin, but places like Eagle River actually went dry. Didn't mean moonshine wasn't going on there, but they were trying to enforce this. But these were key issues that led to a lot of conflict over we should drink. Here we are in Eagle River, 1917, 3 years before the Volstead Act. 6 saloons had to close down. If you're familiar with Eagle River, you just go a few miles south, you're in Oneida County, and they set up all sorts of soda parlors there. But they weren't serving sodas. All right? So they were able to move all those different things. So they would make adjustments. They would have the ice cream parlors. In Manchurish Waters, they opened the Tower Tea Room. As you'll find out in the Tower Tea Room, they were serving many, many other things at that point. Hurley, Wisconsin was by far the biggest challenge as far as law enforcement. You've probably heard of it before, Hell, Hades, and Hurley, and all the things that go along with this. Russell McKay from the University of Northern Michigan said, the head of the Michigan State Police said if it wasn't for Hurley, he couldn't touch the UP, it wouldn't have been a problem. Hurley corrupted the entire the Upper Peninsula. So they actually did a bust where they infiltrated with revenue agents the Hurley ring. They went down to Milwaukee, they picked up liquor, and on the way back, just north of Mercer and Pine Lake in the township of Oma, they set a roadblock. And when these bartenders from Hurley come through the roadblock, one of them didn't stop, one of the prohibition agents shot, went through the top of the roof, hit the guy in the back of the head. Okay, Capuzio was his name, and he's dead. So you might think, oh wow, the feds are really laying it on hard, on Hurley. In Iron County, the Iron County coroner put a charge of murder against the federal prohibition agent for trying to enforce the Volstead Act there. Laws in Hurley all tilted toward crime. This is in 1920, right away. In January 1st of 1921, after this incident, they showed up with 50 different prohibition officers. They went on one side of Silver Street, went through, they arrested 57 people in Hurley involved in illegal liquor use. And the people of Hurley were like, is that all you got? And they hauled them away and they would come back. Hurley was its own epicenter. I could do an hour just on Hurley. In my research, basically, we have Manitowish Waters and the surrounding townships. This is what we're studying. And Hurley and Iron County is a huge sphere of influence. But also Forest County and Crandon, because they're full of kintucks. How many of you have heard that term? This is I've done this presentation in Crandon, and they cheered during the whole thing. I'm serious, they loved it. And then there was Rhinelander that had its own little corruption, but the Chicago ganglands had some, and then we get some gang operation out of St. Paul. These are the various spheres of influence within that area. But World War I propaganda promoted prohibition because, you know, the flag draped woman is saying, stomp out booze. The saloon backer is a traitor to his country. So the dry movement is afoot. We also have the Victorian era. This is an interesting picture. This is from Manitowish Waters. This woman is wearing a whalebone corset. They're in the Northwoods, and these are all ungutted, freshly caught walleyes hammered to the side of their log cabin eaten. I have no idea what that's about, but this is in Victorian garb. Here's in the same area. These women are in flapper garb, lower necklines, bobbed hair, hats, and so on. So we have these different social dynamics that are going on at the same time, but even in the Northwoods. But the Kintuck influence in the region of the Northwoods is amazing. They're operating by a band of Kintucks. They believe they have become established in manufacturing in 3 surrounding counties, and I would say it's more like 5. These Kintucks were influences, and frankly, they're killers. This is part of the whole Moonshine operation in the area. So where do these deliveries go? Well, they go to local places like Little Bohemia right here, or they go all the way down to Cicero outside of Chicago where Al Capone works. And what is driving a lot of this is after World War I and the huge demand for agri-products, there's this huge recession. There's an agri-recession in the 1920s. So places like Marshfield, all the way up north, people are looking to have other streams of income. And it's not hard to put together your own system to augment your income. And all these farm lots and wood lots together, if you got a lot of good water, you're set for operation. So we're going to take a little journey. I've already taken you to Hurley. We're going to go all the way down to here. When you think about moonshine, everybody's wrong. They think it's the still, right? This is moonshining. That's just one phase. The whole operation starts with supplies. Enormous amounts of sugar have to be involved in this. Enormous amount of something to heat these with. You'll learn about some of the stills that are over in areas like Harrison Hills, east of Tomahawk. It's amazing. Then they have to manufacture it, the stills. Then they have to wholesale it and store it. And then they have to sell it. The transportation, the distribution is the most dangerous moment, okay? And this is where you get NASCAR and the Dukes of Hazzard and all the cars running around and so on. That's very real. Then you have to retail it, and then you have to launder the money. All of these are the different phases of moonshine. And so in the Northwoods, people are out of money, and they're interested in getting working. So how did I get involved in this? It's really pretty crazy. I was doing the Civilian Conservation Corps interpretive trail and we found 2 lumber camps on top of the CCC camp, and then we came across these really weird things as we started to do our work. Archaeology today has evolved to some extent, and we started to use LiDAR, and where we could use like laser scanning to see the ground, and we found these unusual pits right at the edge of meadow sedges along the river. So then I started this just to try to corroborate those pits. Here's how it looked in 1937 when the camp was in operation. So I think if I click this, so the river's right out here, okay, and it's spring, and there's a little meadow sedge, a little grassland there. And then as you pull in, look at this giant hand-excavated hole. It has nothing to do with logging, okay, or anything else. And you say, you know, that's something, isn't it? Okay. Here's the river right here. Check this out. We literally have to the right a dugout area to put an egress right off the river edge, right up into the bank. That's the retail spot for the selling of liquor, and the bigger one was the wholesale spot. Oh yeah, it gets more interesting. So here we got Louis Laporte. He's up here with a guy from Racine in Chicago, who Emil Winnetka, Little Bohemia, and they're at Grant Lake, and this is their work. And he was caught, Laporte, not once, not twice, and was indicted on a grand jury. That's hard to do from Manitowish, Wisconsin. This towering woman here later becomes Emil Winnetka's wife. Here she is fishing. The gun is used to stop the muskies. They didn't favor nets back in the day. They shot them with guns out of their tackle boxes. But you can see her in the swagger. She was the rum runner for this operation. She ran it, and she met Winnetka, and they married and hosted John Dillinger. So this was a long line of action. So here's where the Grant Still is. They used the river to go up. Here's the Laporte's logging camp, and those are the 2 caches. So I'm trying to get corroborating evidence with my skeptical archaeologist friends that we can record this as a site. And so I went out and started talking about this, first in Rhinelander, and then all the examples and evidence started pouring in. So I'm giving you the best of hits of all the stuff that I've found in my journey. And I've actually found 2 more underground areas that support that. So we're working this out. But here we go. Laporte is indicted on his grand jury. There was so much liquor on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, they called it the Whiskey Northern. But to be indicted by a grand jury in Manitowish, Wisconsin by 1924, he's doing some good work. Cliff Powell also got arrested. He was selling illegal liquor. In our community up north, when you got arrested and went to college, locals just said, he's off to college. Yeah, Cliff's off to college. He'll be back soon. If you go a little bit further north of Manitowish waters, there's this little town called Manitowish before Mercer. And there's a bar there now called the Lazy Aces. And, of course, there were liquor charges against these guys. But you go in there, the bartender, Jim, there's so many snowmobilers now, you can't hardly get in the door. But notice how there's slots cut out in the stairs going upstairs. So what occurs is the bar is immediately to the left, and this is a door. Those were all hinged. So if the revenuers would come into the town of Manitowish, they would see them. Right here below the stairs, they would have a giant rock suspended, and there was a sewer hole there. They would take all their bottles, they would smash them against it, the liquor would fall down into the drain, and they would escape being caught. Because the railroads, that's the Whiskey Northern right there. So these things are still in operation. If you go there, Jim will show it to you. Yeah, here's Cliff Powell. He was probably making that liquor right in that area to help his sister's resort, which was right on Vance Lake. Notice over here at the yellow arrow, this is a gambling machine. We might as well get right to it right now. In Prohibition, the unholy trinity of all of that was moonshine, gambling, and prostitution. This is all going on simultaneously and all in operation. And we have evidence to that. So we have, again, the Wayside Inn, later Circle Lily. This becomes another moonshine operation. And again, these places are 3 miles apart. We're right next to the Lac du Flambeau Indian Reservation, and liquor flows from and to the Lac du Flambeau Indian Reservation. This is Mary King, the slightly built woman right here, and here she is arrested for selling liquor from the reservation here. John Devine also was Ojibwe, and he was selling liquor bait on his property in Manitouche Waters into Lac du Flambeau. He ended up on a grand jury as well. So it was moving back and forth. And these people are not evil. They're not like criminal masterminds. They are strapped folks trying to make a living. They're doing carpentry, they're guiding, they're picking ginseng, they're trapping beavers, and they're making moonshine because they're trying to make enough money to get by. This is kind of what's going on. But this guy is really happy to take as much of it, and he loves, loves, loves northern Wisconsin. That's Al Capone. We have a brand new collection. I told you about this. These pictures are part of the collection. This is Capone playing guns and gunfighting in the area of Winchester, the township just north of Manitouche Waters, like 3 miles from where we have our historical society. A lot of people talk about Al Capone being at their place, in Hurley or in different areas. Hayward has this whole thing. There's not a shred of evidence that goes along with that. Take a listen to this. Al Brown is a pseudonym for Al Capone. And he's talking to his good friend Bill Sell, who was a ranger and also a realtor. Well, Bill, I want you to find that bootlegger that sold me the wine, remember wine, and whiskey when I was there, and tell him that I want him to come right away to Chicago because I have a big order for him. Tell him to come over to 2242 Cicero Avenue. That is just a few miles outside of Chicago, and when he gets there, ask for Fred Pope in case I'm not there. That's pretty good evidence. Yeah. Better evidence. Oh, by the way, here are the two addresses for Al Brown and Al Capone, the pseudonym. This is all in Capone's hand. So here, there were, in the Chicago outfit, there were attacks. Johnny Turio ultimately will leave after being shot like 5 times and living, and hands over the outfit to Capone. Just before that, there was an assassination attempt in 23 of Capone. And this is a letter written to Bill Sell in Winchester 3 days after the assassination attempt on Al Capone. This is actual correspondence. Well, Sello, no doubt you'll be surprised to hear from me. Well, pal, things have been so darn exciting that I haven't had the time to and chance. So, old Sell, boy, how are you doing? And how is the missus? And your little slugger, are you going to make a champion out of him? If you are, I'll be his manager and tell him I've got a rocking horse. So write and tell me how the best way to ship it up. Well, pal, have no more time to say, only to give my best wishes to your dear wife and all of your brothers. Try to make a trip later. Your pal and friend, Al Capone. P.S. Let me know if I can do anything for you, Al. This is not a passing relationship. So I know the Sell family. I've known them for a long time. Billy Sell, 3rd generation, he said that Capone loved 4 things: fishing, baseball, cooking, and his grandfather, Bill Sell. And Capone came there a lot early on, all right? And we'll explore this more. So here's Fred Pope with 2 10-pound walleyes. A lot of gangsters went there for recreational things, and they had the Turtle Lake Rod Club up there and so on. There were huge estates and big money, and these individuals hid in that area. And I started to think about, boy, why would that be? We have an Italian, Al Capone, and so in this map, the ethnicities, you see the dark areas are where the Italians are, okay? New York, very good. So he moves to Chicago, some color there. We have some Italians, right? Right? So where else in his sphere of influence is he going to find good Italian culture that he can trust? Remember, Michigan is a dry area. Well, it's right there. It's Iron County. It's the mining communities around Hurley. So obviously, this was a huge draw for Capone to that area due to that kind of common culture. Okay? Well, Capone, after 24, and he takes over the outfit, he never comes back. He wants to come back. He was in eastern Pennsylvania penitentiary for a silly weapons charge for almost a year. And he wrote Bill Sell, and he tried to buy land in Winchester. That's where he wanted to go. And we have that letter there. As you're well aware, he got in a little tax problem. But Sell wrote back immediately that the Trossel estate, which is owned today by Coops Mustard, okay, and it's still a contiguous, massive area up in Winchester, wasn't available. But he did have a 2,000-acre tract that he could probably set him up with. So Capone was actively trying to move into state within Wisconsin. Obviously, things went awry. People ask, do you really think the Capones were in Mercer? Well, there were a lot of Capones. There's Al. Ralph Capone certainly was. This little thing that is tracked in our YouTube channel had 16,500 views when I last did this in like the fall, just to give you an idea. But Capone did come back and hobnobbed with others around Billy Goudreau's after he was let out of federal prison because his health deteriorated and he was in really bad shape. So, and we see this with Capone, that by 1941, the Capone family spent the entire year in the Mercer area. So the Capones were certainly there, but in the heyday of him as being the head of the outfit, he really never was able to come back. It was those early days that he was present. So when PBS did their special on Al Capone on prohibition, they came up to see me. I'm one of 5 historians, and they said, "You're the only people who have evidence. Everybody else has stories, conjecture, and things like this. You're the evidence." So that was kind of a fun thing. Al Capone. This is just what I'm reporting, what we have found since I tried to corroborate those holes over on the trail. And then people started coming out of the woodwork. And I'm going to show you some of the amazing stories that we found and how this all rolled. Now next, in Springstead, with a maple sugar business with 2 different labels. So this is Springstead, which is between Park Falls and Mercer, if you will, right here by Stone Lake. Well, a family came up from Chicago, and he was a pharmacist assistant. You may not be aware, but during Prohibition, pharmacists could write prescriptions for alcohol, and they wrote a lot of them. But they still had the same problem. They had to get the liquor, and the prices were jacked up, and it was all regulated. So this assistant comes up to the Stone Lake area, and they make maple syrup, and there's great maple trees there. They have 2 different labels, because in one bottle will go maple syrup, and it'll have a certain label, and the other one is going to be hooch. Do you follow? Is that pretty good? Oh, it gets so much better. We found, remember I'm looking for these underground storage areas? We found, here it is, and this is the the granddaughter of the operator in this cap right here. This is 7 feet deep right here. This is where they kept the mash, and once they distilled it, then they put on the other side, over here, in a smaller area, the liquor, and they would then move it. That's all in Springstead, Wisconsin, okay? And then they had trap doors in these buildings and tunnels that went underneath them. And this was all documented, actually. These images are from the Wisconsin State Historical Society. Somebody else did that documentation. And I'm working with that property owner. He's just fascinated by a lot of it. But it really gets better. The most dangerous time in moonshine is when you transport it, right? Yeah. So guess who is the postmistress and the assistant postmistress? The moonshiner's wife and daughter. They ship this all by mail on the railroads back to Chicago. Isn't that brilliant? Oh yeah, yeah. We find a lot of this kind of creativity. On the lake that I'm on, Alder Lake in Manitowish Waters, there was a guy named Robert Lovelace. He was brilliant. He built a dance hall that could hold 500 people. And he would bring people down from the UP, and they would have these huge parties. And, you know, Carl Christensen said, this is the guy who was shot 7 times by Babyface Nelson and survived in 1934. He lived, and he said, yeah, those dances were all about selling his moonshine. And there was gun drawing and door kicking going on there. It was a wild, wild place. He would actually do tightrope walking across the top of the store, or on top of the pavilion, and then he would run these ads that would go all the way up to Hurley and other areas, and he would have integrated black and white bands on Alder Lake and Manitowish Waters in 1924. I mean, this is just hard to imagine. And you would have midnight luncheons going on there. This party goes to the next day. It was really quite amazing. And you think that's enough, but no. So this is Ole Fisher. He's a rum runner. He runs illegal liquor. This is his car with Robert Lovelace's kids. So here, Ole is with Robert Lovelace. This is Milwaukee County Sheriff Westfall, okay, with his secretary. They're doing some work up on Alder Lake. All right? Here's Ole Fisher on the property with Westfall's wife. So to say that, you know, they were in cahoots, kind of like in Vegas, what happens in Manitowish Waters stays in Manitowish Waters. It was kind of a safe zone, if you know what I'm saying. So I live like right here. This is Alder Lake. This is where their pavilion was. This is where their sawmill area was. And that was all part of this Virgin Forest Park. He also, on Little Trout Lake, just up from Alder Lake, there's actually a canal that connected the two. He had his still right there. So this is on the Lac du Flambeau Indian Reservation. So he would run up there, he would cook his stuff on the res, and then he would take it down the old canal and bring it back. And in 1934, after Prohibition, he was arrested again. So these guys are making liquor after Prohibition is over. You know, Prohibition didn't stop. He actually owned 3 taverns. This one collapsed because no one would shovel the roof. This was a small one that was on Highway 10, and this one still exists today. It's the Howling Dog Saloon. It is a dive bar, and it is awesome, so you should go there. So, you know, it doesn't stop there. I mean, again, shootout in Manitowish Waters. So the soft drink parlor, the Tower Tea Room, a guy named Oscar Hankey, he's from Hurley, of course. He's running this area, and he's known for gambling. So if you look at the property itself, there's a small building on the other side. It's a green building. That was a part-time brothel. Not all the time, but they would just bring the gals down from either Mercer or Hurley, and they would operate in these areas. Well, there was a holdup on a Sunday night in 1930. So they say put him up, and then they just opened fire. They hit him 3 times with bullets. All right? 3 times with bullets. He walked 2 miles to the Plunkett farm and was picked up by a guy named Goudreau. Remember that name. Okay? Austin Goudreau picked him up. All right? So basically, these men then retreat. Also, Hankey was carrying a pistol and was complaining that he was shot too bad to return fire. So again, the notion that this is a quiet little resort town is a little bit off the mark. So Hankey had actually intended to discontinue working at that area and go 300 yards up the road to a new bar, and obviously poaching your bartender didn't work out well, and that's why they thought this gunfight was affiliated with these kind of activities. No one was ever prosecuted for any of those. It gets even more strange. This is on the same lake. This is Russ Lake. Judge Kirsten, he is from Illinois, okay, from Chicago. He was judged to be insane in 1925. This is his island. So this was purchased by some friends of mine, the Clacks, and when they went, and the buildings there, they fell in on each other. I won't get into all those stories, but they had to tear up all the buildings and get them all out of there. And underneath this, what they found is this brass hydrometer. And what it says here, percent of proof of spirits at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Why does the good judge need a hydrometer? Well, because he's sampling what comes out of right here at the end of that process. So they're running Shine and operating that, and so now you have judges who are involved in it. You think for a 6x6 township in a little speck of land, it should be over, right? Yeah, Dillinger hasn't even come, but before that, Leon Gleckman, the Al Capone of St. Paul, he was part of the Jewish gangs in St. Paul. Gleckman in 1924 was called the brains of the Twin City alcohol rings. He was kidnapped. They took them to Hurley first, of course, and then from Hurley, they brought him to Rest Lake, and he was held for 4 days for ransom. And ultimately, this was the Chicago mob muscling the St. Paul people to keep them out of the area. Do you remember I was just looking for holes in the ground where people would keep liquor? And these things just started falling from the sky. Back at home in Manitowish Waters proper, in our resorts, we're selling this illegal liquor, and this is a floating speakeasy. What do? You take it out into the lake, you come off the train, all the bottles of liquor are inside, you row your boat out there, and if any prohibition officers come up to you, all you do is drop your bottles over the deep water, and there's no evidence, and everything's fine. All these little adjustments by resorters and moonshiners and so on, it is really fascinating. This is probably one of the most interesting. They ended up on Spider Lake. This is another Hurley one. Amedeo and Teresa came from different parts of Italy, and they met in Hurley, and they became married. He ran a bar. She was raising 3 children, okay? He's on Silver Street. He is in charge, get this, of bringing the fresh grapes to the Italian communities in Hurley. This happens over all the mining regions. The Italians make their own wine from their family recipes, and they drink that wine, and they ship the grapes on these cars. Anybody knew that before? You may have heard of a label in Napa. It started in Hibbing, Minnesota, Mondavi. The Mondavis all came from the Iron Range. And this is the practice that went on, okay? So here we have the liquor going on. This seems to be going, all right. He dies. She has a bar to run. She has 3 kids, and she is out of money. but she has a grape spigot press. This is an example of one from Milwaukee. So she starts making her own wine to survive, okay? This is not to be profitable or anything. So here we go. Silver Street, Montreal River, this is Michigan, okay? That is the way it looks. This is Silver Street, that bridge down there, that's Michigan. She would have her 5-year-old daughter put a cat in a baby carriage, put a blanket over the cat, and stuff bottles underneath it, and the daughter would march into Michigan, and she ran the liquor. No kidding. No kidding. They later got a property on Spider Lake. Another Italian woman ratted her out, and an Italian gentleman took the fall for her and went to prison, went to Leavenworth. They didn't want to let him out of Leavenworth because he was such a good cook. But ultimately, he served his time, came back, and then he became a caretaker on Spider Lake right in Manitowish Waters. That floating speakeasy was right here where the S was. So this is all kind of coming together in a patchwork. We talked about Kentucks, did we not? Mm-hmm. These are the guys from Kentucky. I don't want to do a history lesson right away because I'm running over already, but when America started, the Scots and the Irish went to the mountain areas in Pennsylvania and alike, and they made liquor. And the Whiskey Rebellion under the Young Nation was a huge fight, and the Scots-Irish got into it with Washington and Hamilton, and many of them fled to Kentucky. And they have a rogue but gifted history with distilling liquor. And a bunch of them moved to Crandon, Wisconsin about 1880. And they kept that tradition going. And that's what we're going to see right here. So this made big, big news because it was a two guys and a woman in a love triangle, and ultimately this Kentuck killed the husband with a hammer, took the wife as his and a hostage. A posse was then ushered in, and it turned into an amazing shootout, and they ultimately got the guy. But this is on Big Lake, just one lake above us, and they were all making shine. This was all predicated on moonshine manufacturing. This is in 1922, very early. At Slate Wildwood on Alder Lake, they had 2 sites here, and there they also, the Slates, had their still all set up just like this, you know what I'm saying, and they started to produce moonshine, and those copper pieces were there for a long, long time. Later, Richard and Helene purchased this property right here on Island Lake, but we could actually do a pontoon tour and go to all these spots and probably have something to drink. I think the best one by far is in Presque Isle. Charlie Spencer shared that his father, Tug, was indirectly involved in Weininger. Charlie's mom is a Kentuck. They're in Presque Isle. Presque Isle is a company town. It's a logging town, the Vilas County Lumber Company. What he would do is he would take his still parts, drop it in a pothole lake, and hide them there. And then he would pull them up and dry them all off and get a fire going, and then he would set his beaver traps. Then he would come back in and he'd start his first batch, and he'd go back out beaver trapping and doing this work, and he went back and forth, and he's just trying to make a living. But again, you know, his wife, here she is, Cora, and this is her story. She was born in Kentucky, all right, and they moved up north in 1908, and she was 24 years of age, and this was all part of this big shootout that took place up there. But he got arrested, Tug. She said, "I love to make the moonshine. We had big copper kettles. We cooked the mash and then added some sugar, and we always stored it in charcoal barrels to ferment. That's how you make it good." The Kentuck liquor was better than anybody's, and that's what distinguished it. Oh, we were caught once, Corey interrupted. I remember they came and arrested Tug, But you know, they didn't smash my equipment. What they did was take 20 gallons of my moonshine and then they find my husband. I knew the reason why they didn't destroy my equipment was because they wanted some more of my moonshine. Absolutely. It gets stranger because this is going on and other Kintucks came into the area and there was a gunfight. This is just the arrest record for Tug Spencer in 1921 to corroborate that claim. Weininger, Presque Isle is a dry town. The Kintucks came in. Rutherford, he was the engineer for the railroad, the constable, the preacher, and the head of the KKK in Presque Isle. Okay? He has been for long, strong, and order. His grandson wrote this whole account, so it's not like I'm stepping out of court. So on Mermaid Lake, which is just south of Presque Isle, the moonshiners were cooking their moonshine, and as the constable came up, he goes up and says, "Freeze, I got you." And the moonshiner picked up his gun and got shot in the hand, and then flipped the gun to his other hand and shot the constable right above his eye and killed him. The constable brought his wife on this operation, okay? And so what occurs after this point is an ongoing mess and problem, but ultimately 2 people will be killed, and this will end a lot of the moonshining in that area. It was truly a violent element. But this, again, is more evidence of the Kintucks. Now, we're at the outer orbit of the Kintucks. Around Crandon, they're like king. Like we're the planet Pluto going around from that point. There we go. So I put these in for Dan Dargenio if he was going to be here, because I had some Eagle River stuff here, so I'll have to put this in real quick. In 1924, we'll see that Vilas County in Eagle River was considered to be the wettest county in the entire state. Here we get another woman involved here. Agent Walter Sutherland brought up his wife, Olive, and she infiltrated this gang. Now, this is the wettest one in the state in 1924. Of this story that I find amazing, the federal agents described the breakup of the bootleggers as the greatest accomplishment of that year. And Jake Weideman, the bootlegger, was arrested. The story is, when the feds show up and arrest them, they can't believe that Olive Sutherland was the one who sold them out. Whatever she did, and I don't know what it is, the worst ring of bootleggers were all duped, and even after they're being arrested, didn't believe that she was involved. That's an interesting thing. How many of you have heard of Barefoot Charlie's up in Land O'Lakes? This is Charlie Haas, and this is from long ago. So Eagle River is good for you because you have property up there. So good at genes here. So he would walk around barefoot. He had these antics. And he would draw the map to Eagle River on his feet. He would dress up as Indians. He would put all these wild animals and living trees into his area. He would have slot machines in the chest of bears and so on, and taps would come out of these trees that were in there. And it was a huge operation. And basically he started as a moonshiner. There he is, Charlie Haas, in his place. He began his great tale. I know you guys get Channel 12 down here, and I know we're up north, but there's a really amazing historian called Kerry Bladorn, and he has a program called Connecting the Dots, and he did a whole story on Barefoot Charlie that you can get online, and I think it would be worth your time. It is really quite a hoot. Kerry is a really good friend. Here we go. So we're going to move from up here and we're going to scoot on down to Rhinelander where there's some trouble. So on the way down to Rhinelander, though, we're going to go to Newbold, which is a town. Like Marshfield, these woodlots and these farm fields, this is perfect moonshining territory for sure. All right? And, you know, within this, in this whole area around McNaughton, what they found here was the worst jug of poor moonshine the sheriff has ever had. Now the Kintocks had really good moonshine. You hear about the stuff that'll make you blind and so on. Some of this stuff is just literally like poison. All right. So it is, you know, the rottenest and dirtiest I've ever saw, said the sheriff. Let's contrast that. We're back on the whiskey northern, but now we're in Rhinelander. Okay. They found an extra good brand of moonshine that had to come from Forest County. They know it's the Kintocks. It's the skills that Cora had up in Presque Isle. This is this Kintock tradition that goes all the way back to Scotland and Ireland. They were using parcel lockers to hide things, just like in movies today at airports and bus stations and railroad stations. Same mode of operation. And this was a big thing. So remember I talked about Oneida County having trouble in the sphere of influence like Iron County. Do you see a pattern in sheriffs here? I highlighted it. See, he's Rod guy. And when he isn't the sheriff, he's still working in the department. He's working the department is what he's doing. So at any rate, some of these guys pretend to be dry, but there's a lot going on here. So from Rhinelander to Harrison. Harrison is this Dutch enclave. I team taught for 20 years with a resident of Marshfield, Bill Zeiker. His family was a Dutch family, and they homesteaded in Harrison, all right? And so Harrison Hills was interesting. So they didn't go to Tomahawk that was closer. They had to go to Rhinelander, and the people in Harrison Hills have documented this. No one was making alcohol like us. We use Coke, which is smokeless, the most expensive. They came in with train loads up to Rhinelander, and the boys would go get it. They didn't have to ask no questions of nobody. They had all the papers fine and dandy. Coke is a special kind of coal that is used for the manufacture of steel. This is an industrial size operation. They're bringing train loads of coke to operate massive stills in Harrison. And of course they need a port of entry, and it's Rhinelander. That's kind of fun, right? So over there, gangsters, bootleggers, and history. Now this looks to be maybe, what, a 20-gallon tank here, roughly? Here they said they confiscated 25,000 gallons of mash, 1,000 gallons of alcohol. All right? The cows got drunk still, because when they got done with all this mash and alcohol, they had huge pumps that would go down to the creeks there. The lakes around Harrison Hills are gin clear and beautiful if you've never been there. And they're just pumping water out there making this. But they put all this alcohol in the creeks. That would happen around here in Marshfield. And again, the cows got drunk. This is the Wausau deal. We reported that, which is kind of a neat thing. Parrish, Wisconsin. You've heard of the Wisconsin Oil and Development Company, haven't you? You know, all the crude oil that comes out of Wisconsin? No? This is a little Saudi Arabia. Well, we got postcards. Here they are. They're drilling. They got a big derrick here. It's a still. This is the cooling tower. These things right here. This is how they were distilling it down. And this comes from our friends in Harrison Hills. And this is just now. Parrish is just now. There were moonshiners all around Harrison. One group, they said, were drilling for oil. They would pound every once in a while. They were cooking moon left and right. They made postcards about it. All right. So this is from the Marshfield News Herald. Here we have this Joe Seraphin guy from Rhinelander. $2,000 bond back in 23. That'd be about $35,000. So basically, Seraphin was in Pine Lake and was given 30 days in jail. The Dead Horse Inn, also part of his operation in Sugar Camp, they also went to jail as well. But this is Joe Seraphin. This is an interesting story. So I started doing this work, and this woman who was a retired teacher from Rhinelander indicated that, my dad, he had me late in life. He had another history. So she told us this whole story of how he went from being a gambler to a moonshiner. He was the biggest pimp in the Northwoods, running brothels. And then he recovered and raised his daughter, and his daughter told the whole story. But here he is, the little Caesar. He would have his girls, she called them her aunts that would be around the house. But it spoke of good business practices. So when the loggers would come in from their camps and they would be drinking and womanizing and gambling, he would take their wallets when they passed out and gave them back to them when they left. And that ensured that they would always come back to his business. This is how he started his good business practice. On the Mattress Waters YouTube channel, we have an hour-long video of his story. But here is his huge area of mash. He'll later be arrested in an extortion plea deal. We'll get back to that in just a moment. But the varsity team, compared to everybody, were the Kintucks from Crandon. This is done in Northern Choices, rural forests in the 1920s. Before there was the Volstead Act in '07, the king of liquor and dealing in the whole state is this Faulkner person, 25 counts of violating the liquor law. So these are our Kintucks. They're making this stuff. This is how they roll, okay? Over 100 facing trial and dry raids, more than 2,500 gallons confiscated of moonshine in Forest County. Forest County and Hurley and Iron County, they kind of competed. These illicit stills were not crude, cobbled together apparatus of hillbilly jokes and legends. Forest County Republican reported a mammoth outfit with 2,400 gallons of mash and 30 gallons of finished moonshine. That's huge. Check this out. Alvin, which is just to the north of Crandon. And you have to understand, they're trying to get this to Michigan. And the Michigan police would have armed guards with Tommy guns on the bridges leading into the UP to keep them out. In a swamp in Alvin, agents found a still capable of turning out 350 gallons of 133 proof alcohol in 8 hours. So again, these aren't, guys with, hayseeds between their teeth and spitting tobacco on their toes. This is quite the operation that's going on. What we have also are these opportunistic thugs, like those who attacked Oscar Hankey at the Tower Tea Room. Lehman's in Wolf River, a man got shot in the left leg above the knee. So these thugs who come in and they try to roll them. This is an ongoing problem. And then we see later on that there are other kind of crimes that take place as well. Now we're back into Iron County. Expect trouble. We're not in Hurley, we're down the road in Mercer. Okay? In Mercer, things are more rugged, more rural and alike. So in this arrest record in 1923, they have boarding houses for lumberjacks, and they had a quantity of moonshine. They paid that fee. There's another one a mile north of Mercer. They collected those. And these are the kind of violations in these boarding houses. They're brothels. All right. Mitch Babbitt's recollections from the history of Mercer, he corroborates this. He was one of the earliest residents. He was a young man at this time. A mile northwest of town, there was a house of prostitution. A madam by the name of Miller ran the house. Mr. Babbitt told his uncle that the lady would get lumberjacks drunk, take their money, shoot them on the tracks, and wait for the train to run them over. So do you think you want to go to her place at Joe Seraphin and get your wallet back? You know, which business model do you think would be best? Yes. Here's Mitch Babbitt as a young guy, and this gets back to the baby carriage thing. Every saloon would have a jug of moonshine under the bar. Mr. Babbitt can remember his grandmother saying into Moonshine Jimmy's with a jar of horseradish to trade for a pint of moonshine. She always paid Mr. Babbitt off with one of those big yellow sugar cookies, you know, sending the kid out for errands and things like that. Again, using children to transfer these things back and forth. And so here we are in Mercer at Billy's Bar. This is Billy Goudreau. Remember Austin Goudreau? Goudreau picked up Oscar Hankey, who got shot. In the back, you can see all of the slot machines. Certainly other games of chance would be offered in this area. And now we have to get our curious crime connection going. I have to pull out my document here that I didn't get ready earlier. Hopefully it's right here. There we go. So Mercer in Iron County and Rhinelander, they kind of have a little history already that I've discussed in this. So Ralph Capone's nickname was Bottles. He is running Billy's Bar as the unofficial manager. A lot of the businesses were fronts for the Capone family, and this is how they operated. So Billy's Bar was really actually Ralph Capone's. Al was, certainly involved in some of this at that time. In the area of Mercer, that's right where Billy's Bar was. It burned down. It's now a Citgo gas station. So Capone was linked with networks, and people say that, Al Capone was in our neighborhood. Al Capone was at our town. Al Capone was doing this. These men would spend money. They would give money to families who were poor, mothers who just had children. They did this in Winchester. They did this in Mercer. They did this everywhere they would go. In Manitoush Waters at the Pea Patch in the 1960s, Ralph Capone was still around and would lay $100 on the bar and say, "Drink up on me, guys." This is in the 1960s, all right? Because remember, the last thing that you had to do with your moonshine is you have to launder the money. And we cracked the code on how they were doing that, guess where? In Rhinelander. So what would happen to Biles, which was a clothing store, and right across the street from it was the Rhinelander Building and Loan Association. It's a Wonderful Life, right? George Bailey, okay, the Building and Loan. Potter ran the bank, right? He was the mean banker. But no, these are friendly people in the community, the Biles and others. They're just making simple loans for simple people. And Ralph bought in. He says, "Hey, I'm a simple guy of simple means. I need money just like everybody else." And he would take out loans at agreeable rates. The regulations are really down on this. And he would pay those loans off way before the term was due, always with bags of cash. He's washing his money. And it's not just in Rhinelander, you follow? The Capones are going everywhere they can to build these relationships to launder their money in similar ways. So, you have to go through all the different processes of this. And people loved Ralph. He was a very friendly individual and so on, and alive. Well, I'm going to have to take a drink of water before we do this because we have kind of the last big event here. But it's a good one. So in 1933, Al Capone has been arrested, and he is in the federal penitentiary system. And then Ralph is on his own. And so a couple of these thugs, Robert Rogers and John Stoche, tried to extort $5,000 in Mercer from Billy Goodrow. Here I have the letter, okay? So let's go along with this. The first of these letters is dated August 14th at Hurley. Dear Mr. Goodrow, please pardon this long letter, but it is really necessary. We're not what you would call a bloodthirsty lot, but we mean what we say. After investigating all the people in this territory, we find that you are our best prospect. We're going to ask you for a favor. If you value your life and property, please pay strict attention to the rest of this letter. 1, we want $5,000 of your money. 2, we want this money in 10s and 20 bills, not marked. Okay? 3, we want you to stay away from the law. We mean that. If you go to the law, 4, we will take your life. 5, if they put you in a cell to protect you, or if you leave this territory, we will have to ruin your property and then wait our chance at you. We are equipped to do this. It is either a matter of paying $5,000 or losing your life and property. 7, we only work on a victim once. If he doesn't pay, he's dead or ruined. If he pays, we don't bother him anymore. If you care to receive further instructions from us, please place this ad in the Ironwood Daily Globe's classified. Baby carriage cheap. Please telephone 1666. Your deadline for this ad is Wednesday afternoon. 10, if the ad appears and signifies you want further instructions. If the ad does not appear, that means you've signed your death warrant. Please do not go to the law. Police protection will not help you. That is all we have to say now. Wishing you a lot of luck. Friendly enemies. What's more dangerous? Okay, this is legit. This is right out of the newspaper. And so we're seeing these different nefarious things taking place. And so they're supposed to go to Gross School, not Goss School, just outside of Rhinelander to exchange this money. Now, remember I talked about how the different law enforcement didn't work well together? And Iron and Oneida County were kind of corrupt. They were really corrupt. And they did a joint task force on this, and they were waiting with guns, all right? And this was not going to go any other way. So what occurs is that meets death when the officer shoots twice. So the first guy, Long Bob Rogers, Robert Rowhouse, he got out of the car first, and he was gunned down and killed right in front of the school. Stoche, on the other hand, was almost shot, but when the Oneida County officer had him right in his sights with his Tommy gun, it jammed. I have shot these Tommy guns before. They are susceptible to jam, especially the round clips versus the slotted clips. So Stoche hits the ground, rolls under his car, and then surrenders, and then they catch him. Okay, so they killed one of these guys. And he was staying on Stone Lake in Manitowish Waters. Again, that's just showing you what happens. So here's the timeline. Most of the time, the plea deal ends up over here on this side. But in 1933, Stoche escapes because of a jammed gun. He gets 10 years in 34, And then 35, he wants to enter into a plea deal. And what he does is he takes Joe Seraphin, the guy was Dapper Joe who had that, he gave him up. And in doing so, Joe Seraphin went to prison, and then when he came out, he just went to prostitution, and then he turned clean and did legit business. But again, this is quite an event. So just finishing up, people come to me with all sorts of stories and all sorts of locations. This is just, I got like 2 best of. Guy came to me and said, hey, we have a still in the bottom of our old cabin. So you can see here, there's a cellar where you come down the stairs, and there are double cedar logs on either side here. And the cellar is 4 feet in from the outside of the cabin, so it's like hyper insulated in there. And we go down to the bottom of it, and this guy's a potato farmer. He's Polish, and he raised his potatoes. These were the sticks they did to put up the potatoes. You can see some scoring on the inside of the area. It was claimed, he said they would use milk pails and mason jars to haul the vodka of moonshine, and all that moonshine went to Emil Winnetka at Little Bohemia in Manitowish Waters. Another woman who got me off of the internet said, we just bought Grandpa's house, and we went into the garage and we lifted up a door, and we looked underneath it, and then they said, by God, that's part of a working still that was hidden underneath the cement of the garage. It's really kind of interesting. So, we share moonshine stories and so on. I was talking to Rich Kapitsky, former colleague of mine, and with all these stories, wouldn't it be fun to do like a moonshine trail all the way down across Wisconsin to lay out all of these stories? And I left a third of the things out of here. These were just the greatest hits. The last thing I'll leave you with is a great one here. Why dry agents weep and wail and gnash their teeth, okay? These are the prohibition agents who returned to Milwaukee Monday after raiding expedition in other parts of the state told the story. An attorney rose in court at Sheboygan to defend a saloon keeper whose place had been raided twice within an hour. And a quart of moonshine was seized each time. Gentlemen of the jury, he said, Joseph Susha is not on trial here today, but the Volstead Act that enforces prohibition, by the way. If you believe in the Volstead Act, find him guilty. If you do not, find him not guilty and take another slam at prohibition. That was all of his defense, all of his argument. The jury went out and returned shortly with a verdict of not guilty. So there you have it, my little foray into Northwoods moonshining and stories. And there are so many more in these deals. The funny thing is, because oftentimes you get people in the audience who say, I can tell you about Grandpa, because, we have these things, and I can put people my cards. 60% of them never get back to me, which is too bad, because that's kind of the bread and butter of those of us trying to do historic preservation going forward. But this is certainly a cool Wisconsin tradition, and I ran a little long. I apologize. Entertain those. Yes.
Just a quick one. Are any of these sites historic? Have they been designated as historic places yet, or is that still in works?
Yes, they have. It's kind of hard to do, especially when it's on private property, because then you have to work with the property owners. The underground cement still with the maple, so you remember the maple syrup one? That property is on that, but they did not record the moonshine site as part of it. So there's an archaeological site index update form, and so if the property owner wants that to be done, that's fine. I found another one of these sites, like the ones we found on the Manitoush River at the camp, Mercer CCC camp, over by Hayward. And I'm working with a retired state archaeologist, and we're going over those. But archaeologists don't like to be embarrassed, so they want everything to be backed up with a lot of evidence. But there's not a lot of evidence of this, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're going to go to all this time and you'd be culpable for going to prison, you're going to hide your liquor. And you're not going to put it at your house, so where are you going to put it? You're going to put it underground. And we have these documents, and so it's some new research as far as archaeology. So it's in route.
Yeah.
Clearly, I'm an advocate. But again, we need to get those corroborating things. It was the DNR state archaeologist and historic preservation officer who tipped me off on the one over by Hayward too. That's also on private property. Anything else?
Are there tours of some of these buildings that you showed us?
Oh yeah, well, they're not formally put together as tours yet, but they're open, yeah. Like you can go to Lazy Aces and talk to Jim and look at the stairwells there, and you can go to Little Bohemia and Kyle will mix you a drink. I promise you that. And you can look at the bullet holes there. But know that Emil Winnettke's involvement goes way, 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 way back to like Chicago and Racine. And then his wife, Nan Laporte, was the rum runner, and that all led to the still. So, I mean, there's this whole network. But mostly what you have are families trying to make a go of it, and they're working with, well, the people giving the best price for their product. It's just simple capitalism. And in the Harrison Hills one that I can't put all that evidence out there, but they talked about a guy by the name of Ford just would show up there and just with rolls of 20s. And he would go into these areas. I mean, the people in Harrison Hills were so poor that they would take the sugar sacks and, that they would put into these massive, massive stills. And they would make their kids' clothes out of them. So these kids were wearing pants and shirts that were old sugar sacks. And this gets back to, like people in Marshfield during the hard times of the agri-depression, or recession of the 20s and the Great Depression. They're doing what they can to survive. All righty.
Do the people up there realize the history that you have just given us?
Oh yeah, and I've done this a lot, and people are some are open to share. I have evidence that some don't want me to share. That would be really better than this. This is pretty good evidence, you know what I'm saying?
Why don't you write a book?
Well, I like preserving history and just doing the work. I'm not interested in writing a book. I'm just, working with the State Historical Society. I was down in Madison today, so that's what I do. Yes, Andy?
So the Al Capone hideout by Couturier, is that not really Al Capone's hideout? Or?
I'm sure it's Al Capone's business interest. And that is without a doubt. And there were certainly more in the area. And could Al Capone have been there? Possibly. But he was supposed to be in Quebec and, over by Toronto and all over. And you have to understand, he came to the Manitoush Waters area all the time from 1920 until 1924 and developed this relationship. And then after that, the correspondence, he could never get back there because he was the head of the outfit. Do you understand? The job just absolutely consumed him. So he's delegating often. And, he's using his brothers, particularly Ralph, to move things around as far as the business. How's that? And they have their own groups. But Wisconsin was ripe with this activity and pushed back against the St. Paul gangs, clearly with the kidnapping. Yeah, right.
In addition to the State Historical Society, we thought about contacting the Department of Tourism. and seeing if they would be interested in making an informal guide to different stops. You've got the preserved historical places perhaps someday, and then the sort of informal whiskey or moonshine tour.
The moonshine tour. I like the moonshine tour.
The excellent, buildings that are still in existence and stop in and.
Yeah, I actually helped create a group called the Northwoods Heritage Council, and it's all small little historical societies up north working together. And we're using an application called Clio, which is geolocated historic information. And we can build tours, and Clio is absolutely free. So
That's so cool.
it would be easy to do this, but it's, again, I need a collaborator. When do you retire? 2 years. 2 years, we'll kick that off, right?
That's my official.
That's fine. And at that point, you and I will build out that moonshine tour. How does that sound? Yeah, because it is fun, and it stretches long, and we've got more evidence than we need to put this together, and it would be great for businesses in all these different communities. And each community should tell their own story. That's the whole point, is the community knows best their own heritage. And that's what we're trying to do. Yes?
Do you know the history of the stills that you have on display? Or maybe
I
you
was
could speak to
told
that?
by Don it was in the Upham Mansion garage, and how it got there and its purposes are largely unknown.
Actually, Kim over there looked up all the information on
Okay.
it today.
It was donated in 2001
Okay.
by an estate. The lady of the estate had passed away, and the executor of the estate donated the still to the historical
And
society.
where was home? Marshfield?
Auburndale.
Auburndale. I would guarantee you that there was this kind of activity going on here. But it really does matter on law enforcement. What is enforced in the area? And you can tell that, like in Iron County, anything goes. And some would argue that was going on into the 1980s even.
There's a little bit more, because the man who had the still, the family, his father actually was in Roselville, and there was a newspaper account of him being caught with a still in the 1920s. And it never said anything about breaking the still up or anything, not to say that this one is, but they're within the family line, there was this going on.
The resiliency of moonshiners and their ability to manufacture new stills, it's amazing. It's just weeks that they turn these things around. This actually looks like it has some pretty good soldering on it, and it's put together quite well from what I've seen. And it's all copper and in good standing, so it is an investment. But these stills down in Harrison Hills, 24,000 gallons of mash, unbelievable. And they bring in Coke, so on those cold days in the middle of winter, where you can see smoke streaming on the horizon from miles away, they're all covert. Oh, but there were gunfights in Harrison Hills. There was one guy who got shot in the leg, went and ultimately lost that leg. Again, there's a lot more information to backfill a lot of this best of series. Yes, sir.
Did Al Capone, did he die in prison then?
He died not in prison. They let him out because he was diminished, let's say, and he was in Florida. He was up in northern Wisconsin, and he had a sad end of life story.
He didn't die at the Big Rock then, but
No, sir.
No?
No.
Oh, so that's just all.
Yeah, I had him up here in 1941, spending a year in Mercer.
Oh, okay.
One of my articles.
Yeah, we got.
I know, I was flashing through them fast, but
We got here late.
oh, that's okay. It's all fun.
Yeah, you got this great.
Yeah, well, it's kind of our heritage, kind of the different turns and so on. But people are fascinated about this stuff. They truly are. And like I said, I'm hoping some others will come forward and release their stories, because there's so much more.
Someone should write a book.
Yeah, somebody should write a book. I'll give them all my notes. How's that? All righty, yes.
I went to high school in Hayward.
Oh, yeah?
We used to always hear the phrase Hayward, Hurley, and Hell. And then recently I heard somebody say Hurley, Hayward, and Hell.
Well-
You know the story?
Well, I really don't know the history of Hayward that well.
Uh-huh.
I do know the history of
Right.
Hurley.
Mhm.
Paul Sturgill, who's a longtime attorney up there, his comment to me one time was, if you become the sheriff of Iron County, it's the last job you'll ever need. Yeah, you know, it's,
Yeah. So then I married Crandon.
okay, well, Crandon, they had their own take on
Right.
things there as well.
I would say that half the population of Crandon is Kentucky, and the other half wishes we were.
Right, well, but, you know, I couldn't go through it. Crandon was dry. Yeah, it was
Just like
dry.
most of
They
Kentucky.
just violated all of that and just rolled over
Under
the.
that, Kentucky was
Leona
dry.
was wet
Yeah.
because they wanted to keep the mill in operation,
Mhm.
but the strong religious convictions of the time, like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and so on, had enormous influence. More so than you would imagine in, you know, I'm a German, I live in Wisconsin, I think everybody likes beer, but you know, that wasn't the case back in the day.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you. You guys have been just so fun. Hopefully, we'll have more great stories to share.